Hello, my name is Jason and I am the Community Engagement Officer at the Civic Barnsley, and we are about to speak to Caroline Cardus, who you could call our resident artist at the moment. Lancaster born, Windsor based. She's an artist and producer, creating mostly text-based work, often taking the form of public art installations, disability activist, often voicing the experiences of the disabled people, neurodiverse, long-term sick people that she collaborates with. And among other things, we are going to talk about the way ahead. And here is Caroline.
Hello.
Hello. Got there. That was actually the third attempt, if you're watching. We do. Oh, no, my fault. We do have Artworks, who's watching, who's one of the groups that has been collaborating with us recently. So I've just very briefly introduced you, Caroline. We are going to talk about Artworks, which is, for us, part of Here and Now, a nationwide project of 40 art centres around the UK, delivering 40 community projects led by artists, co-created with local people, each project attempting to tell the story of a place and its people. And that's all there to celebrate 25 years of the National Lottery giving to community projects. And we first approached Caroline back in 2019, and this project was due to take place and come to fruition last year. But given what's happened in the last 15 months, it did not. And we didn't really start working on it until January this year, I think. But I should say, despite all the remote working, it's been a pleasure working with you, Caroline.
Likewise, Jason.
So would you kindly introduce The Way Ahead? How did that first come about? It's quite a long time ago, wasn't it now?
Yes, it was only the second residency of my art practice, and it happened in over 2003, 2004. And I worked with local disabled people in Milton Keynes. And at that time, I had been through my fine art degree. For the first couple of years, I was mobile. The last year, I was a full-time wheelchair user. And I really, obviously, felt a massive shift in the way I interacted with the world, and the way the world interacted with me. And with new rights legislation coming in October 2004, part of the Disability Discrimination Act, it was to do with goods and services to the public. We talk about, well, you know, if disabled people are going to insist on access coming into shops that have got steps, you know, and, you know, what if they sue us, and what if what if the business goes bust? There was a lot of talk like that going on. And I really wanted to make a protest art that put disabled people's opinions first. And I wanted it to launch on the same day as that section of the DDA, because I just felt like, well, you know, why don't you listen to disabled people? Why don't you see exactly what we have to say, you know? And, you know, sort of, as it goes in law, things are always feel removed from the disabled voice once they actually get to be passed. So I really wanted people to have their say, and I worked with a group of disabled people in Milton Keynes, and we started blank road signs, instruction signs, danger signs, warning signs, information signs, and I asked people what they wanted to say. And this is the way ahead.
Did it launch on the same day as intended?
It did. 1st of October 2004. So,
and what was the reception like then, especially considering it was quite a different landscape in terms of the way that you promote art or promote any kind of event?
Well, it was actually it launched in a shopping centre. The centre MK in Milton Keynes is a big, accessible place. So it wasn't kind of in a gallery, it was out in public, and the reception was really good. People were stopping who had nothing to do with disability, who had no interest in disabled people or disability issues. They were just out shopping. And that was kind of really good for it to be in the local community, because I mean, I at one point I was sitting and watching some skateboarders come by. You know, it was about disability issues, and I wondered if they were going to be, you know, laughing or something. And they were just like, "Oh, this is really cool. You know, can we buy these? Can we put them on t-shirts, posters?" And for me, that was like the moment I thought, okay, so a lot of people are just going to understand that although this is by disabled people, to some extent, it's obviously for disabled people, you know, solidarity with everybody who experiences those issues. But ultimately, you're talking about frustration and need and desire, and people trying to figure out problems, and people just trying to get on with their lives. And that's something that anyone can relate to. So it was really well received.
I can appreciate how that would be taken up in the MK Centre, because in 2006, I worked there for about 3 months. And when you mentioned skateboarders, the guy that I worked with was a skateboarder, and he now runs the art gallery in the MK Centre, commercial art gallery. So it might well have been him that you engaged with. He would have been well up for that if he did. I know him. But as we are in amongst the original road signs, kind of original road signs, shall we have a look at them?
Yeah.
I'm going to flip the camera. There we go. Let's go for this one. Can you see that, Caroline?
I can. It's one of my favourite signs.
So tell us about that.
This was made by Barbara Lizicki. Barbara Lizicki is one of the founding members of the Disability Action Network, or DAN. And Barbara is very, very straight talking, and this is a wonderful thing about Barbara. And she was running some disabled artist training to write funding applications with another artist called Zoe Partington, and together they're a company called Ruby Associates. And Barbara made this sign. I took some blank sheets along to this workshop, and there was a space that Barbara and Zoe made for everybody to, you know, all the artists attending, to actually show what they did. And I gave people these blank things, and this is the sign that Barbara made. And Barbara was there. Barbara was, you know, one of the main instigators of some of Dan's actions. And she made this sign, and it just summed up a really key piece of disability rights history in the UK. So, and I love the language, stroppy crips ahead. That's just exactly what you have to be sometimes to get your rights. And Barbara is very much a living embodiment of that, although she's very nice as well. She, you know, sometimes you've just got to take the action and make things happen. And I love that sign for that. When
you talk about the language being used, the word crips, it reminds me of the way queer has been reappropriated and is used to almost describe a whole culture, artistic culture. And can you explain a little bit more about that? Because the whole use of language around disability is something a lot of able-bodied people tiptoe around, and also venues as well.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, it's something that, you know, I have to learn personally. I remember when I was at school, I was on crutches at one point, and I wear glasses, and some kid called me a goggle-eyed crip. And so I really hated the word crip for many years, because it just felt like, you know, something I was called at school. And then I went to another course somewhere, and I met this car, and this car used it. And I remember scooting over to her at the end of the session and saying, "I don't like that word. Well, you know, why are you using it?" And so she explained it to me. You know, it's about reclaiming language. It's about using language powerfully. And I love that. I love that concept. I think it's a great thing. And so, CRIP itself was by disabled people. And I mean, as for language, it's a minefield, because we have come out of this history of regarding disabled people so negatively. So a lot of people who describe disability are now seen, in the light of today as really as patronising and infantile and insulting. And so I think it's really great. I think it's and it typifies the activist spirit that people reclaim language. For every little term that somebody uses to describe you, it's incredibly. Oh, it can be. It has made me very sensitized. If somebody's say like special or something, or challenged or brave, all the stereotypes. There are so many disability stereotypes, and so making that language a little bit, disabled people ourselves, just talking about that language and saying why we don't like those words, I hope, culturally as well as just generally in society, just demystifies and dismantles some of those negative attitudes and those old attitudes to disability.
I'm just focused on another sign here, which was behind where I was sat. Warning people using sign language ahead. So where did that sign come from?
That came from a young deaf people's group in Milton Keynes. And so there was one girl who made a couple of signs. And I think the other sign she made was, don't shout at deaf people, you'll make them deafer. And she was in an integrated school with her sister. Her sister was deaf, and EFL was her first language. And, a lot of young people just felt like when they were talking to their families using BSL, that other people would be staring and, curious, maybe not very nice about it. And so they made a warning sign for that reason.
Is there a particular sign you think you'd like to talk about? We try and find it for you. This is from the original collection. Maybe one that you have tweaked recently.
You might have to put me in front of it to remind me.
Aha, okay, let's look. We've gone there. We'll go here. We have the new nuclear family.
Yes.
Idiots. Oh, feel free to talk about any of them as you see them. That's absolutely fine.
Well, that was about, people, whenever you think of the family and 2.4 children or the nuclear family, you always assume it's a bunch of very stereotypical able-bodied people. And so that sign was about, well, you know what? There are disabled people everywhere in people's families. It happens. So, there's one coming up here. This one, I think that the picture, you don't really need me to explain if you've ever been patted on the head, and I have. In fact, I've been blessed by a priest. Put his hand on my head and telling me I'll be cured. Oh my God. And it's just the most awful thing. And if you think about it, at one point I used to have a dog, and I went to dog training classes, and they talk about, how you, assert your authority over the dog. And that is just such an assertive thing, isn't it? If you go up to a wheelchair user and you tower over them and you put your hands on them, it's just awful. So,
You take your pick.
Okay. Let's talk about may contain hidden disabilities, because this sign was made. A guy called Mike Boyd, who came to one of the public workshops, and he was talking about neurodivergence, because his son had been diagnosed as being on the autistic spectrum, and he was talking quite specifically. I remember the conversation about how when his son was considered a child or a young person, he had access to certain services, but then when he was an adult, the different ways he had to claim assistance from the government became much harder, and there just wasn't the insight from people, say, at the job centre or the security offices, to really understand that although his son was walking and didn't visibly have an impairment, actually, in his son's case, he was really quite impaired by his and so he wanted to make it clear that it could be anybody who's disabled. And I like that too, because my impairment, sometimes I visibly have a mobility impairment, sometimes I'm able to be mobile, but you know, I can't run. I can't get out of the way if somebody comes at me really quickly on a skateboard thing. And it's really important to just represent and talk about hidden disability, and not just stick to that view of disabled people as the wheelchair use that you see in the park.
What do we have here?
So stop picking on learning disabled people. That's so important. I think learning disabled communities, it's really difficult for some learning disabled people to integrate that feeling incredibly kind of othered by people. And although that sign at the back is it's just all sorts of things where people are just not patient and kind. Actually, can we go back?
Yes,
the blue circle with all the arrows in it. Let's just, if you turn around to, just go to your left. Let's see, this one, forwards in every direction. This one, I love this one. And it was made by Adam Reynolds, and Adam Reynolds was a great figure in the disability arts movement. He's an amazing artist. He's inspired the Adam Reynolds Memorial Bursary at State Art, which is for disabled artists. And I remember the day he made this sign. It was actually the same day that Barbara Laziki made her sign. And it's so positive. I love it. I love the energy, and it applies to everything. It applies to all the disability rights issues that you could ever possibly think of, but it also applies to life in general. And Adam was such a brilliant thinker, and I just think that is for me, that really sums up his energy and his spirit, and for me that's an incredibly important sign. I think you've got that in the foyer, haven't you?
We do. We have this printed in vinyl. It's about 10 foot tall above the box office. Brilliant. That's downstairs. I'm on the 3rd floor right now. Our panorama, we call it. Behind this stone wall is our theatre or assembly room. That's the old building, going back to 1878.
Wow.
And then this part of the building is about 11 years old. Let's find one more, and then I'm going to get back to where I was sat. We'll carry on talking. Let's have a look. Let's go right up here.
Aha, brilliant. Okay. So again, these could apply to so many people in so many different circumstances, and you don't even have to be a disabled person to understand either of these. I think the times when you just try everything all through routes, and everywhere seems to be a dead end. That actually is another Mark Boyd sign, the gentleman I was telling you about, whose son was autistic. He made that because it really felt like once his son reached adulthood, really hard to find, what to do and how to be and how to get help and so on. I think it's more about how to get help, but it can be really difficult. And need I say, with the current benefits administration, all sorts of different benefits, employment support allowance, EIP, carers allowance, all sorts of different things. There are so many hoops to jump through.
Now, you did redesign, is that the word? Redesign some of these signs just recently. Can you tell me why you did that? Maybe talk about an example of what you did on one of them.
Okay. Well, I have a bit of surprising news for people who might be watching who know about The Way Ahead. So The Way Ahead began life in 2004, and it's kind of toured around ever since, on and off. And it had been looked after by, and it was in a basement, and nobody knew when it was the lockdown that the basement had flooded and there was a mudslide, and it sounded awful that the owners of the basement had to clear it out as a matter of urgency when they found out, and The Way Ahead was thrown away. So the original Way Ahead is no more. I think about 7 signs remain, 7 original signs, but that the rest of them, the rest of the original signs you can see on Shape's website, have all gone, which was a really, really bizarre thing. You know, I kind of went through a grieving process and could not really believe that they had gone. So that's it. But very, very weirdly, and this is where you have to wonder if fate is a thing, during lockdown, because The Way Ahead is so enduring, during lockdown, I just thought, well, I'm going to teach myself to learn a vector design program called Affinity Designer. Affinity Designer is great. And The Way Ahead is quite simple shapes, so I will learn by recreating The Way Ahead. And so that's what I did during lockdown. And the first few signs I made took me ages, and then I've got more, used to the program. And that's why we've got the Barnsley theme as well. But the original Way Ahead, as I was remaking the signs, I began to think about things that I might like to change. So we have got a sign back there, I think, that we saw called "They Looked at the Brain, They Didn't Take It Out."
Yes. Let's go down there.
Let's go there and have a look. So this sign was made by a lady called Claudette, and I met Claudette at, I think, Headway MK. So Claudette made this sign because Headway is an organisation that helps people who have had head injuries, brain injuries, and so on. And she just felt like sometimes you might, let people know that you've got some kind of cognitive impairment, maybe due to a brain injury or for whatever reason. And then she found that people were treating her very differently and not in a good way. So she made this sign. They looked at the brains, they didn't take it out. And on the original sign, the original set of signs, I think I've said the second residency of my practice. And although I was an artist, I wasn't a graphic designer at that point. I had no graphic design skills. So we just sent the drawings to a graphic designer who did a fantastic job. The way of knowing that was a black woman. And so when the sign came back, the original sign had a profile of a Caucasian man. So when I was able to redo these signs myself, and I remembered it was Claudette's sign, I thought, well, one thing that I really want The Way Ahead to incorporate going forward is all sorts of different body type profiles and so on. And so I've made the profile a little bit more like a black person rather than just, why should we only have Caucasian people represented in The Way Ahead? That's completely wrong, particularly when a very diverse range of people have contributed to the signs. And so I've changed it, and there are many other changes actually in The Way Ahead, and a lot of them are subtle, but they're to do with people's profiles, they're to do with the way wheelchair users are represented. Normally we always see a wheelchair user looking side on, whereas if we have signs for men and women, we have people looking straight on. So in this one, the wheelchair user is front on, just like you know, the standing figure. And the standing figure have just softened up a bit as well. I think in this original sign, the woman only had one leg. And let's just get away from that kind of toilet door sign, I was thinking. So, you know, this is the sort of the thing. You know, and in this one too, I just kind of softened the body shape a little bit.
We have a tummy.
Yeah, because, you know, I and many other people after COVID, we, you know, it's just, you know, why just normalise one body shape? It's just not right.
Yeah.
So going forward, this is what I'm hoping to do in my practice, to just make sure, in keeping with the signs being, you know, very sort of generic, but also thinking about whether wheelchair users are front on or side on, thinking about people's profiles and making that more diverse, and thinking about making people's body shape diverse as well.
So when it came to finally getting started on what we've ended up calling the Barnsley 15, I think it was in January we started thinking about how we were going to work with the groups, because we had 4 groups lined up. Artwork South Yorkshire, which is an arts organisation working with adults with autism and or learning disabilities. We had My Barnsley 2 and Wednesday's Voice, which are 2 advocacy groups of disabled adults who work actively with the local council and other organisations to change services for the better. And Barnsley Send Youth Forum, which is a group of about 15 young people aged 14 to 24 who all have autism, or who are all autistic, or have learning disabilities, and they're also an advocacy group, and they work closely with Barnsley Council as well. And so once we found out who was taking part, who was able to take part, because some of these services closed down during lockdown, or depending on individual circumstances. For instance, some individuals were living in residential care, didn't have access to smartphones or laptops, so they couldn't do Zoom and things like that. And of course, you were also shielding as well. Everybody was shielding. We had to come up with a different way of getting people's thoughts, ideas, stories. I happen to have one here. Obviously, it's going to be mirrored on here. But you designed this fold-out poster with some blank road signs on. And in the middle, examples of your earlier road signs. And so we sent this to about 60 people altogether. And over about a month, I think it was March, we got sent back lots of drawn, or some of them were just written, but lots of people's own experiences. And some of them are mirrored in the road signs that you've already got, aren't you? Some of the, like ramps, for instance, no ramps. Still no ramps. And some of them just voiced their experiences through an email, but then we gave them to you, and you started to look through them and see what would work as a road sign, and some of them worked straight away, didn't you? It was almost ready-made for you. And then others you had to think a little bit more about how they could be visualised or tweaked maybe. So can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yeah. Well, I was, when the pandemic hit and we were saying, okay, so the workshops, we'll just put them back. One time we were going to do them in March, and then we were going to do them in January, and things just rumbled on, didn't they? And I wanted to stress really strongly to you, let's keep going, because when you are a disabled person, so often you have so many problems to solve, and you just have to figure ways out. And I knew that we would get there, so I was really grateful to you and David that we just kept talking. Are we going to do it? Okay, we can't just you know, do a Zoom, or we can't just email them, and we can't just post them. But then I started thinking about, I think this was you recommended People of Print to me. Peopleofprint.com is wonderful. I'm a big fan of them now, and they do poster zines. And so we started talking about a poster zine. The People of Print one talk about the artist on one side and a great big poster of their artwork on the other. So we started thinking, well, you know, why can't this format for the way? Why can't we just, you know, provide the workshop blanks that I would normally be in the same room as people, face to face, working on with them? Why can't we just send them out to people? So originally, the idea of just sending out blanks was might have been a little bit obscure for people, you know, because they might think way ahead. And so they kind of needed the poster to show them this is the kind of thing that they're aiming for. The workshop blanks on the other side. So that's what we did. We posted them out, and then it was just the whole kind of the good old mobile phone. I mean, it wasn't something that people needed to post them back to me. You know, you just collect them and then put pictures on your mobile phone. And
I should add that we recorded a 15-minute, almost like a walkthrough of the worksheet, and me doing the worksheet. I mean, for me, I'm an able-bodied person, but I was doing it from the viewpoint of a father with a son who's autistic, and so I could feed in it from that point of view. But then we took that video, we got it captioned, uploaded it to YouTube, and then for those people who don't have a laptop, or you know, they could just hop onto YouTube through their phone, even if it was, you know, a cheap phone, they were still able to do that and see an example of what could be done in the worksheets, because we wanted to prove that you didn't need to be able to draw, you know, because essentially all you needed to do was do a stick person, or even just write down your opinions or your experience. And we hoped that got across, because especially with us working remotely and often not seeing these people in the flesh, it's sometimes hard to get across that fact. You know, you don't need to be an artist. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I mean, in the workshops, there's a great atmosphere because a lot of people talked about the ideas, and maybe one person would take on the drawing of it. And sometimes a lot of ideas would come because we had a group discussion first about, well, you know, what we like talk to people about when it comes to access. So yeah, I was pleased to see that it worked that way. I do want to say, for anybody in any of the groups, if you're watching this or you watch it at some point in the future, I'm really, really sorry that we couldn't meet, because and one day we will, because just what in terms of drawings and written ideas, they were fantastic. And I know if we had been in a space together, we would have put every workshop we would have put the world to rights. So I hope another time we can do that, and I hope there'll be more workshops in the future and more signs and things. But I'm really pleased as disabled people. We figured it out. We got it, you know, as project partners. We figured it out. We didn't let the idea die, and now we've got all these amazing signs because there's so much to be said about disability rights, disability access, and experience.
We aren't going to go outside and look at the new installation, though it is installed now, because the weather's not great, and I don't think, given this is my first attempt at an Instagram Zoom, I don't think my phone will make it. But we are going to have it filmed on the 10th professionally, and we're going to have a few more things that we're going to be able to share, like a walkthrough tour, if you like. So I just wanted to ask you a couple of other questions in terms of text-based art. There's a lot of that in your work, not just now, but when I think about Dirty Words for Disabled People, is that the right title? Yeah. Now, where does your thirst for text-based art come from?
Well, I suppose I'm very pro explaining things. my impairment is a rare genetic disorder, and I have spent my life trying to explain it to people, and it changes. And you know, this desire to explain things, to use the right words or find the right combination of words to open the door, you know, and just to people's understanding, whether that's doctors or employers or friends or whatever. And so I've always been very sensitive to language. And in fact, my dad was as well. My dad was a teacher, and he was always, you know, like he liked keywords and things. And he self-identified as being one of the autistic Asperger's. I think he did identify as that, but not diagnosed. But he certainly had a thing for words, and so probably primed me all my childhood by saying things like discipline and so on, just to sort of prompt me to behave myself. And then through my own experience, just living in the body that I have, it's one where, you know, sometimes I'm completely, you know, mobile and walking around and stuff, but, you know, internally, like my internal organs are working or something. How do I explain that to people? How do I find the right way to say, okay, everything is not how it appears? And so that, and seeing artists who use text, really, really important. So I've talked about a couple of things in the zine that Barnsley,
which I think is arriving on Monday.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So I talked about artists like Jenny Holt and Barbara Kruger, who are really trying to get across some really key points about feminism, which is another very close to my heart. And also a poster by a group of artists called the Gorilla Girls, and it's a very famous one. It shows a naked woman in a very classical art. You can see her behind, and she's wearing a gorilla mask, and it's talking about the representation of women in art galleries. And I really liked the way it used an image and text to make a complex point. And so I just like language as well. And I just say I like language, I like typography, I like fonts, I like all that stuff. I did used to have posters of fonts up on my wall when I was a kid, you know, all the stuff about, you know, serif and sans serif and, you know, style and fashion of font, all those kind of things. I love Passport Heavy, which is the font that you see on most of those signs, because it was designed by Margaret Calvert, I think in collaboration with other artists, to make things incredibly clear for, you know, when you're going past in a car. This design, that typeface is designed so that you can see and read very easily and very quickly, and I love it for that. I love it for that clarity, probably because I'm on a lifelong mission to explain myself and others' disability experience.
Now, when it comes to the new 15 signs which you've created for us, or created for Barnsley, they're obviously going to be, or for people that don't know, they are going to be, or have been installed in Mandela Gardens, officially launched on July the 10th. There's obviously a vast difference between the way the public engage with that and the way public engage with this installation here, because this is an exhibition rather than a public artwork, a permanent public artwork. Can you tell us a little bit about public artwork, and maybe specifically disability activism and public artwork, and how you've come across that before in your career, maybe the first experiences of that, and how that might have influenced you?
Well, I think public spaces are the place to bring in opinions from everybody, but I think marginalised groups are doing a great job of that. And campaigns, a group of artists called Led by Donkeys, who do quite critical posters and installations out in public domain about the government are really, I think they're really important to the culture. And from the point that the work became something that was actually shown more often in public spaces and gallery spaces, I've begun to feel like my aim is not to make work that goes. I'd love to have my work in galleries. It's great to have my work in galleries, but it's really great to have it in the public domain. I want people to talk about it who are not the original intended audience. I want everybody to see it, and I want everybody to and to interact with it. So I'm really glad the Barnsley 15 is outside. Hopefully people will just wander around. I haven't yet visited the Civic because of it. But I really hope it's a place that people will just wander around and I'll just kind of exist side by side with everyday life. Because I think that's the only way that we are going to permeate different perspectives in society.
I like the way that, obviously, you have a choice whether you're going to go to a gallery or not. You choose to go and visit this particular exhibition. But public art is antagonistic in a way because it's forced upon you, kind of forced upon you. You don't have to walk down that road, but
Yeah.
you have no decision as to whether that's there or not most of the time. And so you're going to have a lot of people coming across this work that maybe have prejudices or maybe no prejudices, no thoughts at all, haven't even thought about disability rights and access previously. And you might change minds, educate people, enlighten people.
Annoy people.
Annoy people, yes. And I'm looking forward to seeing how people feed back to us, because they will.
Me too.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, the discrimination I have experienced particularly when I've been a wheelchair user, is it's quite interesting, disability discrimination, because sometimes people discriminate in a way where they're just trying to be really, really nice, and they might, tell you that they're going to pray for you. I had somebody assume that I couldn't read because I was in a wheelchair. Like, why? But that was my first ever residency. He showed me his name badge. He put it right up to my face, and then he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't suppose you can read."
Wow.
And so sometimes, but he wasn't trying to be rude to me, although it was actually incredibly rude. It's just the way things happen. It's not every moment is a teachable moment, but the thing about having a sign that you can put up and leave there is that firstly, it's not the same as having a two-way dialogue. Maybe somebody has a space to look at it and think about it, and maybe they never will agree with it. That's fine, but maybe it will just give them time and space to think at their own pace. Is this an issue that I didn't understand before? Is this an issue that I want to change my attitude about now? So I kind of hope that that's what happens with the
I should say that Caroline has taken over our Instagram this week and has been sharing a bit of an insight into some of the new signs. What I like about them is some of them are instant. You know what they mean straight away. Anybody would understand them. And there's still no ramps. Or ramps is a perfect example. But then there's others that do take more time, which is actually a message that you see throughout that installation. Needing more time, you do have to think a little bit more about some of them, which is good. It's good, almost forcing people to think about things. I think I like that. We are going to wrap this up soon. We've been here quite a long time. But I just wondered if there was anything else that you wanted to say before we do.
I suppose just that I think the way in various forms or road signs in various forms might be a continuing part of my project. There are some more radical disability issues that I would like to make work about. Things like disabled perspective on assisted dying, things like the Peterloo Memorial. I think I made one. There's one sign in Barnsley 15, which is wheelchair users shouldn't be left out, and it references that. I would reference more artists who might work about disability, like Damien Hirst, charity sculptor. I kind of feel like there should be a line about that. So this seems to be, from one exhibition that I did in 2004 to the edition that it's had this year and the updates it's had this year. I think that this is now a continuing part of my practice rather than something that I did 17 years ago, 16 or 17 years ago. And I suppose I just would like to leave it there. There's more to come.
There is. So this exhibition on the panorama, you do have to book to visit it in advance via our website, barnsleycivic.co.uk, and it is on until early August. The installation outside, the 15 new road signs in Mandela Garden, obviously that's going to be there for you to look at any time you want. But officially opens on July the 10th, which is the Mayor's Fun Day in Barnsley. And assuming everything is right in the world, you'll be joining us, meeting us for the first time, meeting some of the groups for the first time that took part in the project. I know some of them have come to visit it already, and they've been over the moon when they've seen their signs in the flesh. It means the world to them. So I'm looking forward to more of that, more love. Yeah, and I am going to leave it there. And all going well, this should save to our Civic profile the IGTV tab. So you should be able to watch this back again and again. And I'm going to close now. Lovely to see you, Caroline.
Okay, thank you, Jason. I just want to say such a huge thank you to you and David Sinclair, who have been so positive about getting the way ahead up to Barnsley and continuing with the Barnsley 15. It's just been an absolute pleasure to work with people and a gallery who are so keen to programme this kind of work. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
And I shall see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.